What if the murderer was standing in the room, watching Poirot investigate his own crime? Paris, a magnificent mansion, a room filled with wealthy guests, and a dead man clutching a black orchid. The police call it a simple poisoning, but Poirot notices something terrifying. Everyone is acting. The grieving niece, the loyal friend, the innocent secretary. But one of them already knows how the victim died, and when Poirot discovers a mysterious cipher hidden beside the body, he realizes the murder was only the beginning. The stage is set, the masks are on, and tonight, one actor will forget their lines. Rain whispered against the tall windows of the Valmont mansion, turning the streets outside into ribbons of reflected gold. Inside, however, everything was warmth and elegance. Crystal chandeliers glittered above polished mahogany, silk evening gowns rustled across the parquet floor, and the distant piano played a slow, graceful waltz. The scent of expensive perfume, Cuban cigar smoke, fresh lilies, and champagne filled the rooms. It was a perfect stage, and every person inside had been given a role: the grieving niece, the desperate heir, the loyal secretary, the devoted physician, the charming art dealer, the abandoned lover. They smiled when they were expected to smile. They laughed when the music became lively. They raised crystal glasses and exchanged polite words beneath the chandelier. Nobody knew that before midnight, one of them would become a murderer. At 11:17, the music stopped. A scream came from the library. Then another. The mansion fell silent. When the servants rushed through the corridor, they found Etienne Valmont lying beside his writing desk. He was dead. His body rested against the edge of the polished mahogany desk, one hand curled tightly around a single black orchid. Beside him stood an untouched crystal glass of champagne. An open book of strange symbols lay across the desk, while a grandfather clock near the fireplace had stopped at precisely 11:17. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Inspector Lucien Moreau took one look at the scene and immediately formed his theory. Poison, he said. Dr. Marcel Renard, the family physician, nodded gravely. Almost certainly. Moreau looked at the gathered guests. Then one of you is responsible. No one answered. The silence was almost theatrical. Then a small voice came from the doorway. Not one of them. Everyone turned. Hercule Poirot stood beneath the chandelier. He was small, immaculate, and perfectly composed, his dark suit untouched by the rain outside. His famous moustache was arranged with extraordinary precision, and his green eyes moved slowly from face to face. Inspector Moreau frowned. Monsieur Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. Inspector, you were invited to this dinner. No. Then what are you doing here? Poirot glanced toward the dead man. I was invited yesterday. Moreau stared. By Monsieur Valmont? Yes. And you arrived after the murder? Fortunately. Fortunately? Poirot smiled. Had I arrived earlier, I might have become part of the performance. Moreau did not smile. Poirot stepped into the library. The temperature seemed colder there. The fire had burned low, and the smell of wood smoke mingled with something sharper beneath it. He approached the desk, but did not touch the body. Instead, he looked. The orchid, the champagne, the cipher, the clock, the chair, the carpet, the curtains, everything. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Observe, mon ami. Moreau folded his arms. What? The stage. The what? Poirot gestured around the room. This is not merely a library. Tonight, it is a stage, and these objects, he pointed toward the desk, they are the props. Moreau sighed. You think someone arranged the scene. I know someone arranged something. Poirot leaned closer to the black orchid. Black orchids are rare. Valmont collected them. Did he? Moreau paused. That is what the family says. Poirot smiled. Ah, the family says. He straightened. You see, but you do not observe the performance. Moreau looked irritated. What am I supposed to observe? Poirot turned toward the doorway. The actors. 6 people stood there. 6 faces. 6 different expressions. And 6 carefully constructed masks. Camille Valmont, Etienne's niece, wore a black silk evening gown. Her eyes were wet, and a soft kid glove trembled in one hand. She stepped forward. Etienne, her voice broke. She approached the body and covered her mouth. Poirot watched silently. The handkerchief appeared. She dabbed beneath her eyes. Her shoulders shook. She whispered the victim's name again. Everything was perfect. Poirot's eyes moved to her handkerchief. It remained completely dry. The mask had already slipped. Behind Camille stood Philippe Valmont, the dead man's nephew. His evening clothes were slightly disordered, and rain still darkened the shoulders of his jacket. Moreau turned toward him. Where were you? At 11:17? On the terrace. Alone? Yes. For how long? Philippe hesitated. Perhaps 20 minutes. Poirot tilted his head. Perhaps? Philippe swallowed. I was upset. Why? My uncle and I argued. About? Money. Poirot said nothing. The silence made Philippe uncomfortable. Finally he added, I owed him money. How much? Philippe looked down. 40,000 francs. There it was. A motive. But Poirot did not look impressed. A motive is not a confession, he said quietly. The next actor was Claire Darcy, Valmont's secretary. She wore a dark green dress and carried herself with remarkable composure. Her hair was perfectly arranged, her gloves spotless, her voice calm. You worked for Monsieur Valmont 7 years. 7? 7. Poirot noticed a small mark of blue-black ink on her right index finger. You were working in the library tonight. Earlier, on the cipher. Her eyes flickered, only for a fraction of a second. But Poirot saw it. The cipher, she repeated. Yes, I don't know what you mean. Poirot smiled. Of course you do. The next man was Dr. Renard. He stood stiffly beside the fireplace, his expression solemn. You believe Valmont was poisoned? Yes. How long would the poison take to work? 20 minutes, perhaps 30, perhaps, depending on the substance. Poirot looked at the glass of champagne. Did you examine this? Yes. And? Nothing obvious? Interesting. What is? You are certain of poisoning before knowing the poison. The doctor said nothing. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Bravo, doctor. But the performance, it was not convincing. A tall man stepped forward next. Lucien Marchand, art dealer, family friend, elegant, confident. He smelled faintly of sandalwood cologne and expensive tobacco. I cannot imagine who would want Etienne dead. Poirot looked at him. Can you not? No. Then you are fortunate. Marchand smiled. I beg your pardon? You have no imagination. For the first time, Marchand's smile disappeared. The final suspect was Madame Elise Morel. She had once been Valmont's companion. Her face was pale. I loved him, she whispered. Poirot studied her carefully. Did he love you? She looked away. That is irrelevant. Nothing is irrelevant. She clenched her hands. He promised to marry me. And? He changed his mind. The room became silent. Moreau looked at Poirot. Another motive. Poirot nodded. Yes. He looked at all 6 suspects. Every actor in this drama has a secret. Then he walked toward the desk. The cipher book lay open. 12 symbols were written across the page. A circle, 3 vertical lines, a crescent, 2 dots, a cross. Poirot examined them. "What does this mean?" Moreau asked. "I do not yet know." "You are the famous detective. Surely." Poirot raised one finger. "Patience, Inspector." He bent closer. Something caught his attention. A tiny smear of black wax appeared beside the cipher. Poirot touched it with the tip of his cane. "Ah, what? The person who wrote this was not finished. What does that mean?" Poirot looked toward the suspects. "It means the murder was interrupted." At that exact moment, the lights went out. A gasp came from the drawing room. Someone knocked over a glass. Then came the sound of hurried footsteps. A door slammed. 3 seconds later, the lights returned. Everyone was still there, or so it seemed. Poirot immediately looked toward the desk. The cipher was gone. Inspector Moreau rushed forward. "What happened?" Poirot did not answer. He stared at the empty space where the paper had been. Then he slowly turned toward the 6 suspects. Someone had taken the cipher while the room was dark, which meant the murderer, or an accomplice, was still among them. Poirot adjusted his sleeve. His expression was almost cheerful. "Now," he said softly, "the interesting part begins." Moreau looked at him. "You know who took it?" Poirot smiled. "Not yet." He glanced at the black orchid in the dead man's hand. "But I know one thing." "What?" "The person who took the cipher did not want us to read it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And that means the cipher contains something worth killing for." Outside, thunder rolled across Paris. Inside, the grandfather clock remained frozen at 11:17. The players had taken their positions. The masks were in place. And somewhere in that elegant mansion, the murderer was watching Hercule Poirot. The stage was set. The players assembled. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. Morning came reluctantly to the Valmont mansion. Grey Parisian light filtered through the tall windows, revealing a house that no longer looked elegant. The crystal chandelier still glittered, the polished mahogany still shone, and the silk curtains still hung perfectly. But something had changed. The mansion had become a theatre after the audience had discovered that the performance was a murder. Poirot sat at the breakfast table with a cup of rich continental coffee before him. He had arranged the sugar bowl, spoon, cup, and saucer into perfect symmetry. Inspector Moreau watched him with growing impatience. "You are enjoying yourself," Moreau said. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Enjoying a murder investigation? Not the murder, the investigation." "Ah," Poirot smiled. "There is a difference, Inspector." He looked toward the closed dining room doors. Last night, every suspect performed a role. Today, we discover how well they remember their lines. Moreau placed a folder on the table. 6 suspects, 6 motives, 7. The inspector frowned. 7? Poirot pointed toward the folder. 1 motive belongs to the dead man. Moreau stared at him. Valmont? Precisely. A man who collects secrets eventually creates enemies. Poirot lifted his coffee. And sometimes, mon ami, the greatest mystery is not why someone wanted a man dead, but what that man knew before he died. The first scene began with Philippe Valmont. He entered wearing a rough tweed jacket over yesterday's shirt. His face looked exhausted, and there were dark circles beneath his eyes. He sat opposite Poirot and immediately reached for the coffee. Poirot watched his hand. It trembled. "Did you sleep?" "No." "Because of your uncle?" "Yes." "Or because of the 40,000 francs you owed him?" Philippe stopped. The cup remained suspended in his hand. "You've been investigating me. I have been observing you. Is there a difference?" "An enormous one." Poirot leaned forward. "Last night, you told Inspector Moreau that you were on the terrace for 20 minutes. "I was." "Alone?" "Yes." Why? I needed air. At 11:17, it was warm inside. Poirot glanced toward the window. Rain had been falling heavily. The terrace was freezing. Philippe's face tightened. I didn't notice. That is unfortunate. What? The temperature? Poirot smiled. You remembered the event, but not the conditions. That suggests the scene was rehearsed. Philippe stood abruptly. I did not kill my uncle. I did not say you did. The young man stared at him. Poirot's voice softened. Observe your own performance, monsieur. You are defending yourself before I accuse you. Philippe sat down again. After a long silence, he whispered, My uncle threatened to disinherit me. Why? Because he discovered I had debts. Gambling? Philippe nodded. How much? More than 40,000. Poirot studied him. Then you had reason to fear him. Yes. That is not the same as murdering him. Philippe looked relieved. Poirot noticed. The second scene was Claire Darcy. She entered carrying a leather folder. Her dress was immaculate, her gloves perfectly buttoned, and her expression calm. Too calm. Poirot gestured toward the chair. Sit, mademoiselle. She did. 7 years as Monsieur Valmont's secretary. Yes, you knew his business. Most of it. His private business. Claire hesitated. Some. The cipher. Her eyes flickered. There was no cipher. Poirot smiled. Last night there was. I meant, I never worked on it. That is different. She looked down. Poirot reached for the folder. May I? Claire's fingers tightened around it. No. Interesting. It contains private correspondence. From Valmont. Yes. Then perhaps it contains something important. Her voice became cold. You cannot simply take my papers. Of course not. Poirot withdrew his hand. But you have just demonstrated something useful. What? You are more afraid of what is inside that folder than of being suspected of murder. Claire's face went pale. The mask had slipped, but only for a moment. May I go? Certainly. She stood. Poirot watched her leave. Moreau leaned toward him. You think she's guilty. I think she is frightened. Same thing? Mais non. Poirot looked toward the door. Fear can perform guilt very convincingly. The third scene belonged to Dr. Renard. The physician entered carrying a medical case. He smelled faintly of sandalwood cologne and antiseptic. Poirot pointed toward the chair. You declared poisoning. Yes. Before the autopsy. I recognized the symptoms. Which symptoms? Renard described them carefully. Poirot listened without interrupting. Then he asked, What poison? I cannot say. How convenient. Renard frowned. Are you suggesting I killed him? I am suggesting that you know more than you are saying. The doctor leaned forward. Valmont was my patient. Was he ill? No. Yet you were concerned enough to visit him last night. He summoned me. When? At 10:45. How? A telephone call. From the library? Yes. Poirot's expression changed. Who answered the telephone? I did. No. Who answered when you called the mansion? Renard stopped. I don't remember. Poirot smiled. Exactly. The doctor had rehearsed the beginning of his story. He had not rehearsed the details. Too perfect. Too smooth. Truth stumbles. Lies flow. The fourth scene brought Lucien Marchand. The art dealer entered with a faint smile and the confidence of a man accustomed to rooms where people wanted something from him. His shoes were polished, his silk tie perfectly arranged, and the scent of expensive tobacco clung to his jacket. Monsieur Poirot, Monsieur Marchand, I assume you wish to discuss Valmont, among other things. Marchand sat. Poirot placed a photograph on the table. It showed Marchand and Valmont standing together beside a large painting. Marchand looked at it. I have seen this. You sold it. Yes. It was a forgery. Marchand smiled. That is an accusation. It is a fact. The smile disappeared. Valmont was blackmailing you. Many people owed Valmont money. Not money. Poirot's voice became quiet. Your reputation. Marchand said nothing. Poirot leaned back. Did you hate him? Yes. Did you want him dead? A long silence. Sometimes. Thank you. Marchand frowned. For what? For honesty. Poirot touched his moustache. Your role is improving. The fifth scene was Madame Morel. She entered wearing a dark silk gown beneath a heavy velvet shawl. She looked as though she had not slept. A faint smell of lilies followed her into the room. You loved Valmont, Poirot said. Yes. He promised marriage. Yes. And then refused. Yes. Did you argue? She looked toward the window. Yes. When? Yesterday evening. At what time? 10:30. Where? In the conservatory. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Who saw you? No one. Ah, she looked at him. Is that suspicious? It is inconvenient. I did not kill him. I believe you. She looked surprised. Why? Because you are angry. Angry? Yes. Your grief is not convincing. She lowered her eyes. You think I didn't love him. I think you loved him enough to hate him. Tears filled her eyes. This time, Poirot noticed something different. They were real. That, he said gently, is much more believable. The final scene was Camille. She entered slowly. Her black silk gown was unchanged from the previous night. Her eyes were tired, and she carried the same small handbag. Poirot pointed toward the chair. You knew your uncle was afraid. Camille froze. What? Before his death. She said nothing. Poirot waited. The silence stretched. Finally, Camille whispered, Yes. What did he fear? I don't know. That is not true. She looked at him. How do you know? Because yesterday, when I mentioned the cipher, you looked at the library door. Camille's breathing changed. Poirot continued. Not at the cipher. He leaned closer. At the door. She covered her face. He told me someone was threatening him. Who? I don't know. Did he mention the black orchid? Camille's eyes widened. There it was. The tell. Poirot saw it immediately. Ah, she whispered. Please. Who knows about the orchid? I cannot say. You must. She looked toward the hallway. Someone in this house. Poirot stood. Who? Camille opened her mouth. Before she could answer, a loud crash came from the library. Everyone rushed toward the sound. The door was open. The desk had been disturbed, and on the floor lay a broken crystal glass. Moreau examined it. It was the champagne glass. Poirot knelt beside the fragments. A tiny piece of black paper was trapped beneath the glass. He carefully lifted it. 3 symbols were written in silver ink, the same symbols from the missing cipher. Poirot's expression became grave. The murderer is still directing the performance. Moreau looked around. How? Poirot stood. Because this was not left here by accident. He looked at the suspects gathering behind him. Someone had deliberately placed the fragment where it would be found. Someone wanted Poirot to follow the cipher. Someone wanted him to believe the black orchid was the key. Poirot's eyes narrowed. But perhaps the real secret is not what the cipher says, Moreau asked. Then what? Poirot looked at the 6 suspects. Whoever created this mystery expects me to look at the paper. He lifted the black fragment. But I am interested in the person who was watching while I picked it up. No one moved, yet one face changed. Only slightly, a brief tightening around the eyes. Poirot saw it. He smiled. Ah, mon ami, the players had entered, but who played truth and who performed the lie? Chapter 3, the first act. By the 3rd evening, the Valmont mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a theatre after the audience has discovered that the play is not what it seems. Every corridor seemed to conceal a scene, every closed door suggested a secret backstage, and every conversation carried the weight of lines rehearsed long before the curtain rose. Outside, Paris was soaked beneath a steady autumn rain. Drops raced down the tall windows, while inside, the warmth of the drawing room could not dispel the chill that had settled over the household. The smell of furniture wax, fresh lilies, coffee, and cigar smoke lingered beneath the heavy perfume of the guests. Poirot stood before the fireplace. He had summoned Camille Valmont alone. "You cried beautifully when you discovered your uncle," he said. Camille stiffened. "I was grieving." "Yes. You think I was pretending?" Poirot tilted his head. "I think the performance was excellent." Her eyes flashed with anger. "How can you say such a thing?" Poirot pointed gently toward her handbag. "Your handkerchief." She looked down. It was dry. Camille said nothing. "You pressed it beneath your eyes repeatedly," Poirot continued. "Your shoulders trembled. Your breathing became irregular. Everything suggested grief." He paused, but there were no tears. Camille's face changed. The mask had slipped. She turned toward the window. "I was frightened." "Of what?" "My uncle." Poirot's expression softened. "Ah." Camille folded her arms tightly. "Etienne knew someone wanted him dead." "Who?" "I don't know." "That is not the whole truth." She closed her eyes. "He told me to trust no one." "Did he mention the black orchid?" Camille hesitated. Poirot smiled sadly. "You see, there is the line you forgot." She reached into her handbag and removed a folded letter. "This was given to me 2 days before he died." Poirot opened it. The handwriting was Valmont's. Only 6 lines appeared on the page. "The black orchid is not a flower. It is a key. Trust no one who knows the old cipher. If anything happens to me, the person who understands the orchid will know where to look." Poirot read it twice. "Where did he keep this?" "I don't know." "Who else saw it?" "Claire." The secretary was summoned immediately. When Claire entered, Poirot placed the letter on the table. Her expression changed the instant she saw it. "You know this?" "No." Poirot waited. Claire stared at the paper. Finally, she whispered, "He showed it to me." "What did the black orchid mean?" "I don't know." "Do not lie." "I'm not." Poirot walked toward the window. "Perhaps you are telling the truth. But there is another question." Claire looked at him. "What? Why are you afraid?" Claire's composure weakened. "Because Monsieur Valmont had information about my father." "Tell me." She shook her head. Poirot did not press her. Instead, he said quietly, "The first act of every deception is usually simple. A person hides one fact. Then, another lie is required to protect it. Soon, the person is no longer protecting the original secret. They are protecting the entire performance." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Then perhaps you should understand why people lie." Poirot looked at her. "Mais oui, I understand." He sat beside the fire. "People wear masks because the truth has consequences. A person performs confidence because admitting fear feels dangerous. Someone performs loyalty because admitting resentment might destroy a relationship. A person performs innocence because guilt carries punishment. Even grief can become a performance when society expects tears at the correct moment." He looked toward the rain-streaked windows. "But the mask has a weakness." "What weakness?" "It requires concentration." Poirot smiled faintly. "Truth does not." Claire looked away. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Poirot continued, "I am reminded of an earlier affair in which a suspect believed he had mastered the art of deception. He had practiced his reaction before a mirror. When confronted with shocking news, he widened his eyes, dropped his jaw, and even raised his hands in precisely the right manner. Everyone believed him, yet when the crucial moment came, his body betrayed him. He reached calmly for his cigarette case, before remembering that he was supposed to be shocked. The gesture lasted less than a second, but it revealed the truth. A genuinely shocked person does not know what movement comes next. The body reacts before the mind can direct it. That is why the smallest gesture can destroy the greatest performance. Poirot paused. The human being is an imperfect actor. Claire whispered, and you believe everyone here is acting? Everyone. He looked directly at her. Even you. Later that afternoon, Poirot summoned Dr. Renard. The doctor entered carrying his medical case. You told Inspector Moreau that Monsieur Valmont died from poisoning. Yes. What poison? I cannot identify it. Yet you are certain. I recognized the symptoms. Poirot arranged 3 teaspoons on the table. Did Valmont drink champagne? Yes. From the glass. Presumably. Presumably? Renard frowned. Poirot smiled. Interesting word. The doctor shifted in his chair. Well, you think I killed him. I think you know more than you are telling me. Renard's expression hardened. Valmont was not an easy man. No. He blackmailed people. Yes. He destroyed reputations. Yes. He deserved enemies. Poirot leaned forward. That is not what I asked. Renard looked away. Did you visit him before his death? Yes. When? 10:45. Why? He summoned me. Where was he? In the library. Alive? Of course. What did he say? Renard hesitated. He was frightened. Of what? I don't know. Poirot's green eyes sharpened. You are a doctor, monsieur. You know the difference between fear and shock. Renard said nothing. Did Valmont know he was going to die? I cannot say. Poirot stood. Perhaps. The doctor looked at him. What? You are performing guilt. Renard went pale. But you are not performing murder. What does that mean? It means you are hiding something, but not necessarily the thing we are looking for. The doctor left. Poirot remained alone. He turned toward the fireplace. Something was wrong. The murder had too many secrets. The cipher, the orchid, the clock, the missing page, the black glove, and now Valmont's warning. Poirot knew that the murderer had constructed a false story. But why? To conceal the method? Perhaps. To conceal the motive? Possibly. Or to conceal the identity of someone else? That thought stopped him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The murderer may not be protecting himself, he murmured. Perhaps he is protecting another. That evening, Poirot gathered everyone in the drawing room. A fire burned behind the iron grate. Crystal glasses stood untouched on a silver tray. The piano remained silent. Poirot walked slowly among the suspects. Watch this performance carefully, he said. Each of you has told me a story. Philippe looked away. Some stories contain truth. Camille lowered her eyes. Some contain lies. Claire remained perfectly still, and some contain both. Poirot stopped behind her chair. The difficulty with a lie, mademoiselle, is that it must agree with every other lie. Claire's fingers tightened. Poirot noticed. Then came the sound, a soft metallic click. Everyone turned. The library door had opened. Nobody had touched it. Poirot walked inside. On the desk lay another black orchid, fresh. Its petals were wet. Beside it was a small card. Poirot lifted it. 4 words were written across the surface. You are watching wrong. Moreau stared. Who left this? Poirot did not answer. He looked at the suspects through the doorway. Then his gaze settled on one person. The expression on that face was almost invisible, a slight tightening around the mouth. A quick glance toward the orchid. A breath held for 1 second too long. Poirot smiled. Ah. Moreau asked, "You recognized something?" "Not yet." Poirot looked at the flower. But someone recognized it. The first act had reached its final scene. The actors were becoming nervous. The audience was beginning to understand. And somewhere behind the masks, the truth had started to breathe. The first mask cracked. More would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. By the following morning, Hercule Poirot had stopped asking questions in the ordinary manner. The suspects had become too careful. Every answer arrived polished and prepared, like a line spoken by an actor who had rehearsed it before a mirror. Poirot understood that if he continued asking what they knew, they would simply tell him what they wanted him to know. So he changed the performance. The drawing room was warm from the fire, but the mansion itself felt strangely cold. Rain whispered against the windows. Footsteps sounded on the parquet beyond the doors, and somewhere in the kitchen, a servant dropped a silver tray. The smell of hot coffee, furniture wax, and cigar smoke hung beneath the perfume of the lilies. Inspector Moreau watched Poirot arrange 6 envelopes on a table. "What are those?" "Props," Moreau sighed. "You are enjoying this theater metaphor too much." Poirot smiled. "Perhaps, but the actors understand theater better than they understand interrogation." He pointed to the envelopes. "Inside each is a statement. False? Not necessarily. Then what is the purpose?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed. "To discover who reacts to information they should not possess." The first envelope went to Philippe. Poirot told him that the police had discovered the missing will. Philippe immediately looked relieved, then frightened, then relieved again. Poirot watched every movement. "You are pleased." Philippe swallowed. "I have nothing to fear." "Then why did you look frightened?" "I didn't." "Ah." Poirot touched his moustache. "The performance begins." Philippe opened the envelope. It contained nothing. He stared at the blank paper. Poirot smiled. "The will has not been found." Philippe stood abruptly. "You lied to me." "Yes." "Why?" "Because your reaction was useful." Philippe's face reddened. "I am not a murderer." "No." Poirot's answer was immediate. "But you are hiding something." Philippe looked toward the door. "My uncle had another will." Moreau stepped forward. "Another?" Philippe nodded. "I saw it 3 weeks ago." "What did it say?" "I don't know." "You read it?" "No." "Then how do you know there was another will?" Philippe hesitated. "Because my uncle told me." Poirot studied him. "Why would he tell you?" "To frighten me." "Perhaps." Philippe sat down. "I thought he wanted to teach me a lesson." Poirot nodded. "That is believable." Philippe looked up. "Do you believe me?" "For this particular statement." Poirot paused. "Do not confuse that with innocence." The next actor was Claire. Poirot placed a sealed envelope before her. "The police have recovered the cipher." Claire's face remained perfectly calm. "That is good." "Good? If it helps identify the murderer." Poirot watched her. "Of course." She reached for the envelope. Poirot stopped her. "You do not want to know what it says." "No." "Why not?" "Because I have nothing to hide." Poirot smiled. "Too perfect." He opened the envelope himself. Inside was a blank sheet. Claire stared at it. For one brief moment, her composure disappeared. Her eyes moved toward the fireplace. Poirot noticed. "You expected something?" "No." "Then why did you look at the fire?" She did not answer. Poirot turned toward Moreau. "Search the fireplace." The inspector immediately did so. Beneath the ash, he discovered several burned fragments of paper. Claire closed her eyes. Poirot examined the pieces. One contained 3 visible letters. "Father." Moreau looked at Claire. "What does this mean?" Claire's voice trembled. Nothing. Poirot shook his head. That word is becoming very expensive, mademoiselle. Claire stared at the floor. My father is dead. That is not what I asked. She remained silent. Poirot let the silence continue. Finally she whispered, Valmont had letters concerning him. What kind? I don't know. Again, I don't know. Poirot leaned closer. You know. Her eyes met his. And you are afraid that I know. The mask slipped, but only slightly. But Poirot moved on. The third scene belonged to Dr. Renard. The doctor entered the room with his medical case and immediately noticed the envelopes. More theatre? Yes. I dislike games. Then perhaps you should stop playing one. Renard frowned. Poirot placed a glass of champagne on the table. This is the glass found beside Monsieur Valmont. The doctor's eyes moved toward it. Poirot poured a small amount into a second glass. Laboratory tests have identified the poison. Renard leaned forward. What poison? Poirot smiled. I did not tell you there was poison in this glass. The doctor's face went rigid. Silence. Poirot's voice became gentle. Bravo, doctor. Renard looked away. That proves nothing. It proves you expected me to say poison. Everyone suspected poisoning. Not everyone. Poirot pointed toward the glass. You knew the poison was associated with the champagne. Renard shook his head. I made a medical judgment. Before the laboratory report. Yes. Then you are either remarkably clever or remarkably careless. Renard stood. I will not be insulted. Poirot remained seated. You are not the murderer. Renard froze. What? You are hiding something, but your fear is different. What do you mean? You are protecting someone. The doctor's expression collapsed. He whispered, I promised. To whom? He looked toward the door. Claire. Moreau stepped forward. What did she ask you to do? Destroy the medical records. Why? Because Valmont had used them to threaten her. Poirot nodded. Another mask removed. Renard lowered his head. I thought I was helping her. You were. Poirot's expression hardened. But you also helped the murderer. Renard looked up sharply. What? Poirot said nothing. He had not yet explained. The fourth scene was Lucien Marchand. But Poirot placed a photograph before him. This time, Marchand did not smile. The photograph showed Valmont standing beside a painting. A black orchid appeared in a vase behind him. Marchand stared. You have seen this before. Yes. What does it mean? It means Valmont knew about the society. What society? Marchand's jaw tightened. The orchid circle. Moreau leaned forward. Explain. Marchand sighed. It was a private group. Wealthy people, politicians, collectors. During the war, information passed through them using symbols. The black orchid. Yes. Poirot nodded slowly. And the cipher? Marchand looked at him. The cipher identified members. Poirot's expression became serious. Names. Marchand nodded. Valmont was preparing to expose them. Who was on the list? I don't know. Poirot studied his face. That answer may finally be true. Marchand looked surprised. You believe me? I believe you do not know. Poirot paused. But you know someone who does. Marchand said nothing. The fifth scene involved Madame Morel. Poirot told her that the police had found a witness who saw her entering the library at 11:10. She immediately denied it. Impossible. Why? Because I was in the conservatory. Who can confirm? No one. Then you are trapped. She looked frightened. I did not kill him. Why did you go to the library? I didn't. Madame Morel. I didn't. Poirot waited. Then he said quietly, the witness does not exist. She stared at him. Her shoulders dropped. You lied. Yes. Why? Because you reacted. Before I finished the sentence, she began to cry. I went to the library. Moreau stepped forward. Why? To confront him. About what? Marriage. Poirot nodded. Did you see Valmont alive? Yes. When? 11:10. The room became silent. Poirot's eyes sharpened. That is important. What? Because the murderer wants us to believe Valmont died at 11:17. He looked toward the hallway clock. But perhaps he died earlier. Madame Morel's face went pale. I don't know. Poirot smiled faintly. Now that, madame, I believe. Then came Camille. She entered quietly. Poirot did not give her an envelope. Instead, he placed the black orchid on the table. Camille stared at it. Her breathing changed. You recognize it? No. Your uncle told you about it? No. Then why are you frightened? She looked toward the flower. I am not. Poirot leaned closer. Your hands disagree. Camille looked down. Her fingers were trembling. The orchid is a symbol, she whispered. For the orchid circle? She nodded. How did you know? My uncle showed me. Who else knew? Camille hesitated. Claire, anyone else? She looked toward the doorway. Yes. Who? Before she could answer, the lights went out. A crash came from the library. Then footsteps. Fast. Someone was running. Moreau drew his weapon and rushed into the corridor. Poirot followed. The library door was open. The curtains moved in the cold night air. The window stood open, and on the desk was a fresh black orchid. Beneath it lay a note. Poirot picked it up. Only one sentence was written. You are looking at the wrong actor. Moreau stared. Who wrote this? Poirot looked at the suspects gathering behind them. Then he noticed something. Claire was staring at the orchid. Not the note, not the window, the flower. And beside her stood Dr. Renard. He was watching Claire. Poirot smiled. Ah. Moreau turned. What? Poirot folded the note. The performance is becoming complicated. He looked around the room. The murderer is not the only person hiding something. Outside, thunder rolled across Paris. The fire in the drawing room crackled. Somewhere upstairs, a door closed softly. Poirot touched his moustache and looked toward the dark corridor. Rehearsed lines, he murmured. One by one, they begin to fail. The actors were losing control. The script was changing. And Poirot knew that soon someone would be forced to speak without preparation. Rehearsed lines faltered. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The mask slips. The following morning, the Valmont mansion seemed to be holding its breath. No piano played in the drawing room. No servant laughed in the corridor. Even the grandfather clock appeared reluctant to announce the hours, its hands still frozen at 11:17, as though time itself had been instructed to remain silent. Poirot stood before the library window, looking at the rain. On the desk behind him lay the latest black orchid. Its petals were almost perfectly black, except where a single drop of water had gathered like a tear. Inspector Moreau entered. We searched the grounds, and nothing. The window opened from inside. Footprints? None. Poirot smiled faintly. Then our invisible actor has performed very well. Moreau frowned. You keep calling them actors because they are behaving like actors. Poirot turned. Yesterday, someone left a message telling us we were watching the wrong actor. He pointed toward the orchid. That message was not meant to frighten us. Then what was it meant to do? To redirect us. Moreau looked at him. Toward whom? Poirot's green eyes narrowed. That is the question. He gathered everyone in the greenhouse that afternoon. The room was warm, despite the cold weather outside. Hothouse roses filled the air with sweetness. Lilies stood in tall crystal vases, and hundreds of orchids rested beneath the glass roof. Rain drummed above them, while water trickled through the narrow gutters. It was an almost beautiful place, but Poirot had chosen it carefully. "Why here?" Camille asked. "Because this is where the black orchid belongs." Claire stood beside her. Dr. Renard remained near the door. Philippe avoided everyone's eyes. Marchand folded his arms. Madame Morel stared at the flowers. Poirot looked at each of them. "Today, mesdames et messieurs, there will be no more performances." Marchand gave a bitter laugh. "Impossible." "Why?" "Because everyone here has something to hide." Poirot smiled. "Exactly." He walked slowly between them. "Camille." She looked at him. "You performed grief." "I was grieving, partly." Poirot pointed toward her. "But your grief was mixed with fear." "You knew your uncle expected danger." Camille lowered her eyes. "You were afraid that if you told the truth, you would become a suspect." She nodded. Poirot turned. "Philippe." The young man stiffened. "You performed desperation." "I was desperate." "Yes, but you were desperate for money, not blood." Philippe looked relieved. Poirot continued. "You stole the will." Philippe's face changed. Moreau stepped forward. "What?" "I did," Philippe admitted. "Why?" "Because I thought the new will would leave me nothing." Poirot nodded. "And therefore you lied." Philippe lowered his head. "But you did not kill your uncle." "No." Poirot turned toward Madame Morel. "You performed the abandoned lover." Her face tightened. "I loved him." "You hated him too." She said nothing. "That hatred made you suspicious, but hatred alone does not make a murderer." Madame Morel began to cry. This time, Poirot did not question the tears. They were genuine. He looked toward Marchand. "You performed the loyal friend." Marchand laughed. "I was never his friend." "Exactly. You already knew that." "Yes." Poirot held up the photograph of Marchand and Valmont. "You were his partner in forgery." Marchand's expression hardened. "And you threatened to expose him." "Yes." "Yet you did not kill him." Marchand shook his head. "No." Poirot nodded. "Because if you had murdered him, you would have taken the cipher." Marchand looked at him sharply. "Why?" "Because you knew its value." The room fell silent. Poirot turned toward Dr. Renard. "And you?" The doctor stood motionless. "You destroyed medical records." "I did." "You lied about the time you visited Valmont." "Yes." "You helped Claire." Renard looked at her. "Yes." Moreau stepped forward. "What exactly did you help her hide?" Renard hesitated. Poirot raised one hand. "Let him answer." The doctor took a breath. "Valmont possessed documents concerning Claire's father." "What documents?" "Financial records." "From the war?" "Yes." Claire closed her eyes. Renard continued. "Valmont used those documents to blackmail her." Poirot nodded. "So you destroyed medical evidence because you believed you were protecting her?" "Yes." "Then why did you lie about the poison?" The doctor looked confused. "I didn't. You told us the poison was in the champagne." "I suspected it." "No." Poirot stepped closer. "You knew." Renard stared at him. Then Poirot's expression changed. "You did not administer the poison." The doctor's shoulders dropped. "No. But you knew the substance." Renard remained silent. Poirot waited. Finally the doctor whispered, "Yes." "What was it?" "An old cardiac compound." Moreau looked startled. "Would it kill him?" "In the wrong quantity?" "Who obtained it?" Renard looked toward Claire. She shook her head. "No." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "You?" Claire backed away. "No." "Then who?" The doctor pointed toward the greenhouse. "Valmont." Everyone stared. "He already had it," Renard said. "He told me he was keeping it for someone." Poirot became very still. "For whom?" "I don't know." "That is not true." Renard swallowed. "He said it was insurance." Poirot turned toward the orchids. "Insurance." He repeated the word softly. Then he saw it. a small brown stain beneath one of the flower benches. He crouched. The stain was not soil, it was dried blood. Moreau immediately moved toward it. Poirot held up a hand. "Do not touch it." He examined the ground, then the orchid pots, then the wooden bench. His eyes narrowed. Someone was injured here. When? Recently. Claire suddenly stepped backward. Poirot turned. She was staring at the bench, not at the blood, at the space beneath it. "The mask slips," Poirot whispered. Claire's breathing quickened. Moreau noticed. "What is under there?" Claire said nothing. The inspector moved toward the bench. Claire suddenly cried out, "Stop!" Everyone froze. Poirot looked at her. "Why?" She covered her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't kill him." Poirot nodded. "I know." Claire stared at him. "But you know who did?" She began to shake. "No. Yes. I can't." "Why?" "Because he'll kill me." Silence. Poirot stepped closer. "Who?" Claire looked toward the greenhouse door. Then she whispered one word. "Valmont." Moreau stared. "Valmont." Poirot's expression became grave. "Explain." Claire shook her head. "Not Etienne." She looked at the black orchids. "His partner." "Who?" Claire could not answer. A sudden crash came from behind them. One of the greenhouse windows shattered. Everyone ducked. A dark figure ran across the far corridor. Moreau rushed toward the door. Poirot followed. They found nobody. But on the floor lay a torn piece of black fabric. Poirot picked it up. The material was silk. He smelled it. Perfume. Chanel. He looked back toward the group. 3 women wore Chanel. Camille, Claire, Madame Morel. But only one had a small tear in her sleeve. Poirot's eyes settled on Claire. She looked down. Her sleeve was intact. Madame Morel's was intact. Camille's was intact. Poirot frowned. Then he looked again. The tear was not from a sleeve. It was from a scarf, and someone was wearing one. Dr. Renard. The doctor touched his neck. His scarf was missing a piece. Poirot's eyes widened. Renard stepped backward. "No." Poirot approached him. "Where were you last night?" "In my room." "Alone?" "Yes." "Another performance." Renard shook his head. "I didn't kill Valmont." "I believe you." "Then why?" "Because you were in the greenhouse." The doctor looked at Claire. Claire looked at him, and in that moment, Poirot saw everything. The doctor's fear, Claire's guilt, their shared secret. And the expression of terror on Renard's face was not fear of arrest. It was fear of someone else. Poirot turned toward the others. "Nobody leave." He looked directly at Claire. "Tell me the truth." She began to cry. "I didn't mean for him to die." Poirot remained silent. "I only wanted the cipher." "Why?" "Because it contained my father's name." "And what did you do?" "I put something in Valmont's champagne." Moreau stepped forward. "You poisoned him." Claire shook her head desperately. "I thought it would make him unconscious." Poirot's expression hardened. "You knew it could kill him." "I was frightened." "Fear is not an excuse." "No." She sank to the floor. "It was supposed to be a warning." Poirot looked at the black orchid. "But you made one mistake." Claire looked up. "What?" "You believed the black orchid would hide your crime." Poirot crouched beside her. But the orchid did not conceal the murderer. He looked toward the others. It revealed the person who knew what the orchid meant. Claire began to sob. The mask was gone. Completely. There was no rehearsed grief now. No careful innocence. No polished performance. Only fear. Real fear. And Poirot understood that the murder was not as simple as Claire's confession suggested, because if Claire had poisoned Valmont, then who had entered the greenhouse? Who had left the messages? Who had stolen the cipher? And why had someone tried to make Poirot suspect the wrong actor? He stood slowly. "Claire," She looked up. "Did you act alone?" Her lips trembled. "No." Poirot's eyes hardened. "Who helped you?" Claire looked toward the doorway, her face drained of color. Before she could answer, the lights went out. A woman's scream pierced the darkness. Then came the sound of running footsteps. When the lights returned, Claire was still on the floor, but Dr. Renard was gone, and beside the black orchid lay a fresh drop of blood. The mask had fallen, but beneath it was another mask. The true face was still hidden. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. The disappearance of Dr. Renard transformed the mansion. Until that moment, the investigation had been a performance in which everyone still believed there might be an exit. Now the doors were guarded, the telephones were disconnected, and Inspector Moreau had ordered every servant to remain in the house. The drawing-room fire burned brightly, but nobody seemed to feel its warmth. Rain beat against the windows. A grandfather clock chimed somewhere in the corridor, and on the table, beneath the golden light of the chandelier, lay the black orchid. Poirot stood beside it in silence. Moreau approached. Renard helped Claire. Yes. She admitted poisoning Valmont. Yes. Then why did he disappear? Poirot slowly turned. Because he was afraid. Of Claire? None. Then who? Poirot's green eyes moved toward the dark corridor. That is what we must discover. He picked up the orchid carefully. The murderer has been performing 2 dramas. Moreau frowned. 2. The first is the murder of Valmont, and the second, the manipulation of our investigation. Poirot placed the flower down. Someone has been directing what we see. The inspector looked toward the suspects. Who? Poirot smiled. That is why we must go backstage. The search began in the library. Behind the velvet curtains, Poirot discovered a narrow panel in the wall. It appeared decorative, but when he pressed the carved edge, it opened with a soft click. A cold draft moved through the room. Moreau raised his flashlight. Beyond the panel was a narrow passage. The mansion has a secret corridor. Of course, Poirot said. Of course? In a house filled with secrets, mon ami, one must always expect a backstage. The passage smelled of dust, old leather, and damp stone. Their footsteps echoed against the walls as they moved deeper into the mansion. At the end was a small room. Inside were shelves. Boxes, letters, photographs, and dozens of black orchids pressed between sheets of paper. Moreau stared. What is this? Poirot walked slowly around the room. The hidden life of Etienne Valmont. On one shelf stood a collection of old photographs. Valmont appeared in nearly all of them, but not alone. There were politicians, businessmen, artists, military officers, and one photograph that made Poirot stop. A younger Lucien Marchand stood beside Valmont, but there was another man in the picture, Dr. Renard. Moreau stared. Renard knew Valmont before he became the family doctor. Yes. Poirot picked up another photograph. This time, Claire was visible in the background. She had been much younger. She knew them all. Poirot's expression became thoughtful. Not merely knew them. He turned the photograph over. Written on the back were 4 words. The Orchid Circle. Paris Moreau looked at him. So Marchand was telling the truth. Partly. Poirot opened one of the boxes. Inside were coded letters. Each contained a flower symbol, a rose, a lily, an orchid, a violet. Poirot examined them carefully. The flowers represented identities. Members of the circle. Yes. And the black orchid. Poirot nodded. The highest secret. Moreau looked confused. What secret? Poirot opened another letter. This one contained only a single sentence. The person wearing the black orchid controls the archive. Moreau stared. So Valmont controlled it. Perhaps. Then someone killed him to obtain it. Poirot shook his head. Not quite. He pointed toward the wall. There. A small photograph had been pinned behind the letters. It showed Valmont standing beside a woman. The woman was much younger. Moreau recognized her immediately. Madame Morel. Poirot nodded. But that photograph was taken 20 years ago. Exactly. The mystery deepened. Madame Morel entered the room shortly afterward. When she saw the photograph, her face changed. You found it. Poirot studied her. You knew about this room. She looked away. Yes. How long? 20 years. Moreau stared at her. You were part of the Orchid Circle? Madame Morel shook her head. No. Then why were you here? Because Valmont recruited me. For what? Information. Poirot waited. She finally confessed. Etienne used me to gather secrets from wealthy families. And you agreed. I was young. Why stop? Because I discovered what he was really doing. What? Blackmail. She looked at the photographs. He collected secrets and sold silence. Poirot nodded. The backstage. Yes. Madame Morel's voice became bitter. I wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let you. No. Poirot looked toward the black orchid. What happened then? He threatened me. With what? My daughter. Moreau looked shocked. You have a daughter? Madame Morel nodded. Valmont knew where she lived. He said that if I spoke, he would destroy her. Poirot's expression softened. So you remained silent. For years. Until now. She nodded. Until he died. Poirot studied her. You hated him. Yes. But you did not kill him. No. Why? Madame Morel looked toward the photograph. Because I had already learned something important. What? Valmont was afraid. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Afraid of whom? He never told me. But you knew. I heard him arguing. With whom? Someone called the director. Poirot became very still. The director? Madame Morel nodded. Valmont said, You cannot control me anymore. Who answered? I don't know. Man or woman? A man's voice. Moreau looked at Poirot. That changes everything. Indeed. Poirot turned toward the shelves. The murderer had not merely wanted Valmont dead. Someone had been controlling Valmont. Someone had been controlling the Orchid Circle. Someone had become the director behind the director. Poirot returned to the photographs. He noticed something. Every photograph containing the Orchid Circle had one detail in common, a black orchid. But in one photograph, the orchid had been replaced by a white flower. He examined it closely. Written beneath the image was a name, M. Darcy. Poirot's expression changed. Claire's father. Moreau stared. Was he the director? Perhaps. Poirot looked toward Madame Morel. Did you know Claire's father? Yes. What was his role? He kept the records. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then Claire did not merely inherit her father's secret. He looked at the archive. She inherited his role. The room fell silent. Moreau shook his head. But Claire killed Valmont. Yes. Then she is the murderer. Poirot turned. No. Moreau stared at him. You heard her confession. I heard what she believed. What does that mean? Poirot walked toward the door. Claire may have poisoned Valmont. Claire, but that does not mean she planned his death. Moreau followed him. Someone may have used her. Exactly. They returned to the drawing room. Claire was still under guard. Poirot approached her quietly. You told us you wanted the cipher because it contained your father's name. Yes. But you never told us why. Claire looked at him. Because my father was not merely a member of the Orchid Circle. Poirot waited. He was the keeper of the archive. Moreau inhaled sharply. And you? Claire's voice trembled. After he died, Valmont took his place. Poirot nodded. So when Valmont threatened you, you believed he possessed your father's secrets? Yes. And you wanted them destroyed? Yes. Who told you where to find the poison? Claire froze. Who? She looked toward the door. I received a note. From whom? I don't know. What did it say? She whispered, Give him the flower. Give him the poison. Let the director finish the performance. Poirot closed his eyes for a moment. Now everything fit. The poison, the orchid, the cipher, the missing doctor, the false messages. Claire had been an actor, but she had not written the script. Poirot turned to Moreau. Someone used Claire as the instrument. And the director? Poirot looked toward the dark window. Still backstage, a sudden sound came from upstairs. A door slammed, then footsteps. Moreau rushed toward the staircase. Poirot followed more slowly. At the top of the stairs, they found an open bedroom. Inside, the curtains moved in the cold night air. On the bed lay Dr. Renard's medical case. Beside it was another black orchid, and beneath the flower, a photograph. Poirot picked it up. It showed Claire's father. Standing beside him was Valmont, and behind them, partially hidden in shadow, stood another figure. Poirot stared at the photograph. Moreau leaned closer. Who is that? Poirot's expression became grave. The director. Can you identify him? Poirot turned the photograph over. There was a date, 23 years earlier, and beneath it, one sentence. Every actor answers to someone. Poirot looked toward the corridor. The curtain is beginning to rise on the backstage. He touched his moustache thoughtfully. Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Man Behind the Mask. The photograph remained in Hercule Poirot's hand. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Rain struck the tall windows of the Valmont mansion, and somewhere below them, a servant quietly closed a door. The sound seemed strangely distant. Inspector Moreau stared at the photograph. Who is the man? Poirot did not answer immediately. He studied the shadowed figure standing behind Etienne Valmont and Claire's father. The face was partially concealed by darkness, but there was enough to reveal one detail, a distinctive silver watch. Poirot's eyes narrowed. I have seen this before. Where? Poirot turned the photograph over again. On the night of the murder. Moreau frowned. Impossible. Nobody noticed a watch. Exactly. Poirot placed the photograph beside the medical case. People look at faces. They look for expressions, tears, fear, anger. But an experienced murderer understands this. He gives them the face they expect to see. He tapped the photograph. But objects do not perform. Moreau stared at the silver watch. Whose is it? Poirot smiled. That is what we shall discover. They returned downstairs. The suspects had been gathered in the drawing room once again. Camille sat near the fireplace. Philippe stood by the window. Claire remained under guard. Madame Morel held a cup of tea between trembling hands. Lucien Marchand stood with his arms crossed. Nobody knew why Poirot had summoned them. Then he placed the photograph on the table. 23 years ago, he said, a secret organization operated in Paris. Marchand's face hardened. The Orchid Circle. Precisely. Poirot continued. At its center was an archive containing financial records, political secrets, forged documents, blackmail material, and private correspondence. He looked at each person. Your dear Etienne Valmont did not create this organization. Philippe looked confused. Then who did? Poirot turned the photograph around. This man. Everyone leaned forward. The shadowed figure remained difficult to identify. Claire stared at the photograph. Then suddenly, she whispered, No. Poirot looked at her. You recognize him? No. Again, with the same word. Claire stood. You don't understand. Then help me understand. She looked at the photograph for several seconds. Finally, she said, "That photograph was taken before my father died." "Yes. And the man behind him." She stopped. Poirot waited. Claire's voice became barely audible. "He was supposed to be dead." Silence filled the room. Moreau stepped forward. "Who?" Claire looked toward him. "Henry Darcy." The room seemed to freeze. Moreau looked at Poirot. "Darcy, Claire's father," Poirot said. Claire nodded. "My father died 20 years ago." Poirot shook his head. "No." Claire stared at him. "His death was reported." "Yes, but the body." She hesitated. "There was a fire." Poirot nodded. "And nobody could identify the remains." Claire's face went pale. "You think my father survived?" "I think someone wanted everyone to believe he died." Marchand suddenly spoke. "That's impossible." Poirot turned. "Why?" "Because I attended the funeral." "Did you see the body?" "No." "Then you attended a ceremony." Marchand said nothing. Poirot walked slowly toward him. "You knew Henri Darcy?" Marchand looked away. "Yes." "You knew he survived?" "No." "Then why are you frightened?" Marchand's jaw tightened. "I am not." Poirot smiled. "Your hands disagree." The art dealer looked down. His fingers were trembling. Poirot returned to the photograph. The director was not a title. Moreau frowned. "What do you mean?" "It was a role." Poirot pointed toward Henri Darcy. "After Darcy disappeared, someone else assumed control." "Valmont?" "Yes." "And after Valmont died?" Poirot looked around the room. "Someone else." The realization struck Moreau. "The director is still alive." "Yes." A sudden noise came from the hallway. Everyone turned. A servant stood frozen in the doorway. "Inspector." "What is it?" "The telephone." Moreau followed him. The receiver had been lifted. Someone had made a call from inside the mansion, but nobody had used the telephone. Moreau checked the line. "Disconnected." Poirot smiled. "Of course." He approached the desk beside the telephone. There was a small black envelope. He opened it. Inside was a single card. "The director is not who you think." Poirot read it twice. Then he smiled. "Very clever." Moreau stared. "Why?" "Because our mysterious friend has just told us exactly what he wants us to believe." "And you don't believe it?" "No." Poirot folded the card. "The truth is rarely announced." He looked at Claire. "Who knew your father was alive?" Claire swallowed. "Valmont." "Anyone else?" "Dr. Renard." "Marchand?" She looked at him. "I don't know." Poirot turned toward Marchand. "Did you?" Marchand remained silent. Poirot walked closer. "You knew Henri Darcy survived?" Marchand closed his eyes. "Yes." Moreau immediately stepped forward. "Why did you lie?" "Because Darcy threatened me." "With what?" "My family." Poirot nodded. Again, fear. Marchand's voice became bitter. "Henri Darcy was not a man you could refuse." "Where is he?" "I don't know." "You last saw him?" 3 years ago." "Where?" Marchand hesitated. "A private club near the Seine." "Name?" "The Étoile." Poirot turned to Moreau. "Find out who owns it." Moreau nodded. Then Poirot noticed something. Marchand was wearing a silver watch, the same style as the watch in the photograph. Poirot looked at his wrist. Marchand immediately covered it with his sleeve. Too late. Poirot smiled. "Interesting." Marchand froze. "What?" "Your watch." Marchand glanced down. "It is an old family piece." "How old?" 25 years. Poirot's expression became thoughtful. "May I see it?" "No." "Why?" "Because it has sentimental value." Poirot nodded. "Of course." He stepped away. Moreau looked confused. "You think the watch belongs to Darcy?" "Perhaps." Then Marchand could be the director. Poirot shook his head. No. Why not? Because he is too frightened. Moreau frowned. Too frightened? A director controls fear. He does not display it. Poirot looked around the room. Someone here is still calm. Everyone looked at everyone else. Poirot's gaze settled on Camille. She sat perfectly still. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady. Camille. She looked up. Yes? You knew your uncle had a secret archive. She said nothing. You knew about the Orchid Circle. No. Your uncle told you. Yes. What else did he tell you? Camille looked toward Claire, then toward Marchand. Finally, she whispered, he told me the director was coming back. Moreau stepped forward. When? The night before he died. Poirot's eyes narrowed. What exactly did he say? Camille's voice trembled. He said, if Henri returns, nobody in this house will survive. The room became silent. Poirot slowly turned toward the window. Henri D'Arcy was alive. Or someone wanted them to believe he was. The black orchid was still appearing. The cipher was still missing. And someone was controlling the investigation from inside the mansion. Then Poirot noticed something on Camille's chair. A small silver thread. He picked it up. Where did this come from? Camille stared. I don't know. Poirot examined it. It matched the fabric of the scarf worn by Dr. Renard. But Renard was still missing. Poirot's expression changed. The doctor was here. Moreau looked toward the corridor. You think Renard returned? Poirot shook his head. No. He looked at the thread. Someone wearing his clothing. A sudden scream came from upstairs. Everyone rushed toward the sound. They found Dr. Renard lying unconscious in the hallway. His medical case was open beside him. There was blood on his forehead, and in his hand was a torn piece of paper. Poirot took it carefully. Only 3 words remained visible. The director knows. Poirot looked at the unconscious doctor, then at the frightened faces around him. He understood the message. The director was not merely watching, he was moving, and now he had begun removing the players one by one. Poirot's voice was quiet. The curtain is rising. He looked toward the dark staircase, and this time the director is on stage. The director had stepped from the shadows. The next mask would be the hardest to remove. Chapter 8. The Hidden Witness. Dr. Renard lay unconscious on the marble floor. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Inspector Moreau knelt beside him. He's alive. Poirot crouched beside the doctor and examined the wound on his forehead. Not a serious blow, he said. Someone wanted to silence him, not kill him. Why? Poirot looked at the torn paper still clutched in Renard's hand. The director knows. Because the doctor discovered something. A few minutes later, Renard opened his eyes. His gaze immediately found Claire. Don't trust. His voice faded. Poirot leaned closer. Who? Renard swallowed. The wrong person. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Who attacked you? Renard's breathing became shallow. I saw him. Who? The director. The room went silent. Moreau leaned forward. What did he look like? Renard closed his eyes. Not a stranger. Poirot waited. Someone from the house? A faint nod. Yes. Before anyone could ask another question, Renard lost consciousness again. Poirot stood. He looked at the 6 suspects. Now we know something important. Moreau frowned. What? The director has been inside this mansion all along. Suddenly, Camille spoke. I know who it is. Everyone turned toward her. Poirot remained perfectly still. Who? Camille looked terrified. My uncle. Philippe stared at her. Etienne? He wasn't the director. Camille shook her head. He was working for him. Poirot's expression hardened. Then why did he die? Because he tried to escape. She reached into her handbag and produced a small key. My uncle gave me this the night before he died. Poirot took it. What does it open? The old study. Moreau frowned. Valmont's study. No. Camille pointed toward the library wall. The room behind it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The archive. They returned to the secret passage. The key opened a second door hidden behind the shelves. Inside was a small chamber. There were no documents, no photographs, only a single wooden chair. And on the chair lay a black orchid. Beneath it was a handwritten note. Poirot picked it up. The first murder was 20 years ago. He read it twice. Then he looked at Camille. Who died 20 years ago? She whispered, "My father." Poirot's expression changed. The dead were beginning to speak, and the director had just revealed that Valmont's murder was not the beginning of the story. It was only the latest chapter. Poirot turned toward the dark passage. Then we have been investigating the wrong murder. Behind him, someone quietly closed the hidden door, and this time, Poirot heard the lock turn. Chapter 9. The door that should not open. The hidden door slammed shut behind Poirot. For several seconds, there was complete darkness. Poirot remained perfectly still. Then he heard footsteps, slow, measured, moving away from him. He smiled. "Ah, so you wish me to follow." He struck a match. Its tiny flame illuminated the narrow passage. The walls were covered with old photographs and faded documents. At the end stood another door. Poirot approached it carefully. The door was unlocked. Beyond it was Valmont's private study, but the room had been abandoned for years. Dust covered the desk. Books filled the shelves. A cold fireplace stood against the far wall. Poirot noticed something immediately. A chair had recently been moved. He touched it, still warm. Someone had been sitting there. Then a voice came from behind him. "You should not have come here." Poirot turned. Claire stood in the doorway. Her face was pale. "What are you doing here?" "I followed you." "Why?" "Because I know what is in this room." Poirot looked around. "Then tell me." Claire swallowed. "My father used this study." 20 years ago? Yes. Then why is someone using it tonight? Claire stared at the desk. I don't know. Poirot walked toward it. A drawer was slightly open. Inside lay an old black notebook. He opened it. The pages were filled with names, politicians, businessmen, judges, police officers, and beneath them, symbols. Poirot turned another page. There was one name circled in red. Etienne Valmont. Claire covered her mouth. My father knew. Yes, he knew Valmont would betray him. Poirot nodded. Then he found another name. Claire D'Arcy. Her face went white. What does that mean? Poirot closed the notebook. It means your father was preparing for his own disappearance. Suddenly, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Claire grabbed Poirot's arm. Someone is coming. They hid behind the heavy curtains. The door opened. A figure entered, tall, silent, wearing a dark coat. Poirot watched carefully. The stranger approached the desk and removed something from beneath it, a small metal box. Then he turned. For 1 second, the light revealed his face. Poirot's eyes widened. He knew him. The man left. Claire whispered, "Who was that?" Poirot did not answer. He stepped from behind the curtain. On the floor lay a silver watch, the same watch from the photograph. Poirot picked it up. Then he smiled. Now we know the director has returned. Claire stared at him. Who is he? Poirot looked toward the closed door. Your father. Outside, thunder shook the mansion. The dead man had returned, and Poirot finally knew who was pulling the strings. Chapter 10. The Man Who Died Twice. For several seconds, Claire could not speak. My father. Poirot stood beside the desk, the silver watch resting in his palm. Yes, but that is impossible. I saw his coffin. You saw a coffin, Poirot replied quietly. Not your father. Claire shook her head. Why would he pretend to be dead? That, said Poirot, is the question that matters. Before they could continue, a floorboard creaked outside. Poirot immediately extinguished the lamp. They waited. Footsteps approached the study, then stopped. Someone stood directly outside the door. Claire held her breath. Poirot whispered, "Do not move." The handle slowly turned, but the door did not open. A moment later, the footsteps disappeared. Poirot waited several seconds before lighting the lamp again. "He knew we were here," Claire whispered. "Yes, then why didn't he enter?" Poirot looked at the old notebook. "Because he wanted us to find this." He opened the metal box the mysterious man had left behind. Inside was a collection of letters. The first was addressed to Etienne Valmont, the second to Lucien Marchand. The third carried only one name, Claire. Her hands trembled as Poirot gave it to her. She opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her father's. "My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, then Valmont is dead, and the director has returned. Do not trust the police. Do not trust Marchand. Most importantly, do not trust the man who claims to know the truth about my disappearance." Claire stared at the final sentence. Why would he write this? Poirot continued reading. The letter explained that Henri Darcy had discovered a secret within the Orchid circle. Someone had been using the organization to control influential people across Paris. Valmont had eventually discovered the identity of that person and attempted to expose him, but Darcy had disappeared before he could reveal the truth. Poirot stopped. "Wait." Claire looked at him. "What? Your father did not disappear." He pointed toward the final paragraph. "He was hiding." Claire read the words again. Then her face changed. "He was afraid." "Yes, of the director." Poirot nodded. "Exactly." Suddenly, another piece of paper slipped from the envelope. It contained a single sentence. "The director is not Henri Darcy." Claire stared at Poirot. "But you said..." "I was wrong." Poirot's expression became serious. "The man we saw tonight was wearing your father's watch." He held it up. "But that does not make him your father." A sound came from the corridor. This time it was a woman's voice. "Poirot." He turned. Madame Morel stood in the doorway. Her face was pale. "You must leave this room." "Why?" "Because I know who the director is." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Who?" She looked toward Claire. Her father was only the keeper. "Then who was the master?" Madame Morel whispered. "Etienne Valmont." Claire stared at her. "But Valmont is dead." Madame Morel nodded. "Yes." Poirot slowly smiled. Then perhaps the greatest deception was not hiding a living man. He looked at the dead man's photograph. Perhaps it was making us believe the dead man was innocent. Thunder rolled over Paris. And for the first time, Poirot understood the terrible possibility. The murder investigation had begun with a dead man, but the real mystery had begun 20 years earlier, and Etienne Valmont might have been controlling it from the very beginning. The man who died twice was finally beginning to speak.